Bhagavate Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavatir Naishtiki Om Agyantimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Mukham karoti vachanam, pangam langyate girim, yat kripatamam vande, Shri Gurudin taranam, Paramananda Madhavam. Hare Krishna. We are discussing the the concluding part of the 21st chapter of the third canto. The chapter started with the the meditation of Kardam Muni. As a consequence of that, Krishna personally came and gave him his darshan. This is on the banks of Bindu Sarovar. Kardam Muni, on seeing Lord Krishna, is very, very happy. He glorifies him with nice words and also talks about uh, uh, the fallacy of asking the Lord for material benedictions. And he condemns himself also, that he is approaching the Lord who can offer everything for a good wife, for a suitable wife. And the Lord responds very, very graciously and kindly to Kardam Muni. He assures him that uh, he will attain the highest benediction, which is going back to Godhead. He also assures him that his request is not materialistic, but to fulfill the order of his Guru, Brahma, to fulfill the order of the Lord. And then he fulfills the benediction that Kardamb is asking for a suitable wife. So he says that in 2 days, Swambhavu Manu will come. He glorifies Swambhavu Manu, glorifies his daughter Devahuti. They will come. And he gives him a glimpse into the future, that he will marry Devahuti, have 9 daughters. They will marry different Prajapatis, and through them the universe will get populated. And then he himself, as a Kalamsha, will appear as the son of Kardam. And as Kapila Muni, he will preach Sankhya to him for the benefit of his mother Devahuti and for devotees in future. And that Kardam Muni will ultimately reach the supreme destination. So saying this, Krishna, Lord Vishnu, he disappears. He travels back on the back of Garuda. And then the subsequent verses are glorification of Bindu Sarovar. That we see that Bindu Sarovar is made pious because of a teardrop that fell from the Lord's eyes into the Sarovar. And Prabhupada says that because the Lord is absolute, there's no difference between him and his tear, just like there's no difference between him and his foot wash, which is essentially Ganges. They have the same spiritual potency. And the verses that we're doing are essentially a description of the glories of Bindu Sarovar. And they're being glorified to glorify the devotees who reside over there, and because of his connection with the Lord. That the Lord personally came over here and his teardrop fell into the Sarovar. So that makes it glorious. Just like we see a lot of descriptions of Vrindavan, and we see a lot of description of other places where the Lord had pastimes. So these places no longer are mundane places. By the connection with the Lord, they are spiritualized, they're tirthas. So glorifying them is like glorifying the Lord. So we say that the Lord, His dham, His devotees, His leela, gun, roop, they're all the they're all the paraphernalia that accompanies the Lord. They're inseparable from Him. So we were at last week we finished verse 41. So we'll resume with verse 42 and 43. Kadamba Jampakashoka Karanja Bahulakshanahi Kundramanda Rakutajaisha Chuktapote Alankritam Karndvaya Plaverham Sahi Kurejal Kukuktahe Chareshas Chakarvakaischa Chakore Ravalgu Kujitam. Lake Bindusarovar was adorned by flowering trees such as Kadam, Champak, Ashok, Karanja, Bakul, Asan, Kunda, Mandara, Kutaj, and young mango trees. The air was filled with the pleasing notes of the Karandava ducks, plavas, swans, ospreys, waterfowl, cranes, chakravakas, and chakoras. So Prabhupada says that some of the trees that are mentioned over here, their English name cannot be found, or the exact English name cannot be found. But this point was made earlier on that all these trees and animals that are found are pious. So they're just like there are pious men and impious men. So there are pious plants and trees and animals, and there are impious plants. So plants that have useful fruits and that have aromatic flowers, plants that have trees that are useful in giving shade or giving wood, they're considered pious. Trees that are thorny or dry and rough and with bitter sap, they are considered impious. Similarly, animals like swans and ducks and cranes and chakoras are pious. And then animals like crows and vultures and carnivorous animals, they're considered to be impious. So because of the piety in this area, because of the presence of the devotees and the Lord, everything around Bindu Sarovar, the plants, animals, the environment is completely pious. Verse 44, Tatheva harinahe krodhe swavedga kunjaraha gopache haribhir marke nakuler nabhiratam. Its shores abounded with deer, boars, porcupines, gavias, elephants, baboons, lions, monkeys, mongoose, and musk deer. So the verses are describing the ashram both from a manifest perspective and a spiritual perspective. So spiritually, it was on the banks of a lake dear to the Lord, and because of that, it produced intense affection for the Lord. Because of the Vaishnava Sangha, bhakti was prominent. Everywhere they said mantras are being chanted. The fire of the yagyas was there. So that is the spiritual aspect of it. Physically, it's being described in terms of the birds, trees, animals that resided in that place. So Prabhupada mentions that musk deer are very special because they're called kasturi, and they carry a special gland in them which generates a very aromatic smell. Now they are mostly extinct because they were hunted down for that musk, but they're considered to be special. And then gavyas are special cows. Prabhupada says that they have a bunch of hair at the end of their tails. So this hair that is there on the tail of the gavyas is used for chamar. So even though Prabhupada doesn't mention it over here, but I'm guessing that the gavyas are called yaks because the chamar is also made, or at least that's what I understand, that the hair on the chamar is the tail of the yak. The Prabhupada said that gavyas are sometimes called chamaris, and they're considered very, very sacred. So when you buy chamars, then they have two kinds of chamars. They have chamars which are made from the hair that have naturally fallen from the tail of the gavyas, and those chamars, the quality is a little bit poor because the hair generally falls after it is old. And then there are chamars that are made by plucking the hair from the tail. So generally the recommendation for the devotees is not to buy those chamars because when they pluck the hair, they give a lot of pain to the animals. So it's just like us. Somebody pulls our hair out, it's painful. So even though the chamars look good because the hairs are young and bright, but generally for devotees, the recommendation is that you should not. They call them. I think the shopkeepers they have a special name for it, but mostly they'll tell you, or you can figure it out by looking at it. Yeah. Then there are for the next 3 verses that are further describing the entry of Swayambhu Manu. Pravishya tirthavaram adirajasahatmajaha dadarsha munimashinam tasmin hutashanam vidyotmanavapushaha tapasya ugrayujachiram natikshama bhogvataha snigdha pangavalakmana tadvyarthamrita kala piyusravanena cha trashum padmapalakrisham jatilam chiravasasam upashmritya malinama yatharaham asmakshrutam. Entering the most sacred spot with his daughter and going near the sage, the first monarch, Swayambhu Manu, saw the sage sitting in his hermitage, having just propitiated the sacred fire by pouring oblations into it. His body shone most brilliantly, though he had engaged in austere penance for a very long time. He was not emaciated, for the Lord had cast his affectionate sidelong glance upon him, and he had also heard the nectar flowing from the moon-like words of the Lord. The sage was tall, his eyes were large like the petals of a lotus, and he had matted locks on his head. He was clad in rags, Swambhav Manu approached and saw him to be somewhat soiled, like an unpolished gem. So in 12 verses, pretty much till the end of the chapter, from 45 to 46, we will see the entry of Swambhav Manu into the ashram of Kardama Muni and the reception that he gets from the Muni. So the time of his entry is described that Kardama Muni had just finished performing his morning yajna, which is known as Uthutasan. So this is the early morning yajna that is done to propitiate the Lord. And the point to be noted here is that even though he had received the personal darshan of the Lord and the assurance of the Lord, he's continuing with his practices. So the mood of a devotee is not working towards a goal, but working towards a relationship. So in other endeavors, when the goal is reached, then that practice ceases. In Karma Kand, when the person gets what he's asking for, whether it's a child or a wife, when that is done, that practice ceases. When the yogi gets the mystic powers, that practice ceases. Not in case of bhakti. The means is the same as the end, and the end is the same as the means. So if anything, the practice actually intensifies. Prabhupada also mentions this, the early morning sadhana, he says, is the best for devotional practices. So Prabhupada says that it appeared that Kardama Muni had undergone great austerities. And he was observing brahmacharya, the vow of celibacy. So he makes this point that that the vow of celibacy, it creates effulgence in the body. Whereas the lack of effulgence, celibacy, it makes one appear to be haggard or without a glow, because it's the nature of austerities. That the more austerities that one performs, the effulgence in the body grows. And practicing brahmacharya vrat is considered to be one of the greatest austerities. So Kardama Muni had been following it for thousands and thousands of years. The other thing, of course, is that despite following all these austerities, he was actually looking healthy. And that was because of the glance of the Lord. That because he had seen Snigdha Apanga Avalokanath, that he had seen the Lord face to face. So by the association of the Lord, all signs of material distress go away. And the same can also be said with the association of the other forms of the Lord. Association with the holy name, association with the deities, even association with the devotees, because they carry the Lord in their heart. It makes one glow with spiritual effulgence. Prabhupada talks about a little bit of his own empirical observation. He says that we have actually seen that many brahmacharis and grahasthas connected with the International Society for Krishna Consciousness have improved in health, and a luster has come to their faces. It is essential that a brahmachari engaged in spiritual advancement look very healthy and lustrous. The comparison to the sage to an unpolished gem is very appropriate. Even if a gem is just taken from a mine, looks unpolished, the luster of the gem cannot be stopped. Similarly, although Kardam was not properly dressed and his body was not properly cleansed, his overall appearance was gem-like. Verse 48. Atho tajam upayatam nridvevam parantah puraha saparyaya prayagrana pratinandaya narupaya. Seeing that the monarch had come to his hermitage and was bowing before him, the sage greeted him with benediction and received him with due honor. So we see the respective moods of these two great personalities. So both are actually peers. That Swayambhavu Manu and Kardama Muni, they're both the sons of Brahma at the same level. But Swayambhavu Manu has taken on the role of a Kshatriya, and Kardama Muni is that of a Brahman. So because the Brahman as a Varna is considered to be superior to that of a Kshatriya, we see Swayambhavu Manu giving obeisances to Kardama Muni. And then how is Kardama Muni responding? That he is giving him benediction. So the word that is used over here is pranata, that the king, he was humbly bowing pura in front of him to give him honor. And Kardam was responding with anurupaya in a way that was commensurate to the position of the king. Verse 49. Gritaranam ashinam samyatam pranayan munihi smaran bhagavadadeksham ityaha salakshanya. After receiving the sage's attention, the king sat down and was silent. Recalling the instructions of the Lord, Kardam then spoke to the king as follows, delighting him with his sweet accents. Slakshnaya gira, with a mellifluous voice. So what is it that Kardam was recalling? The instructions of the Lord, that Swayambhavu Manu will come and his daughter would be the wife of Kardam Muni. Verse 50. Nunam chankramanam deva satam samparakshannayate vadaya cha satam yastvam hare shakti dhipalini. The tour you have undertaken, O Lord, is surely intended to protect the virtuous and kill the demons, since you embody the protecting energy of Sri Hari. So it's interesting over here that Kardam Muni, he has already been told by the Lord that Swayambhavu Manu is coming to him for the purpose of offering his daughter to him. The words of the Lord are infallible. So that event is destined to happen. But we do not see Kardam Muni making that explicit statement. So he does not go like, okay, Swayambhavu Manu, you have come, let's fix a date for my marriage with your daughter and get on with it. In fact, he does not even mention it. He will ask him about everything else. that how are you managing your kingdom? How is everything else with you? He glorifies him as an emperor, and then he will keep quiet. So this is just the sign of somebody who is cultured. That even though in his mind he knows that there is an event that is inevitable, but he is still following the social protocol. That he has a guest, he has welcomed the guest, and then with sweet words he will glorify the guest, and then he will wait for the guest to express his thoughts. So in great devotees, when they interact with one another, they're setting an example of Paramatma Prabhu, you may want to mute yourself. There's some disturbance come. Thank you. So this is just a sign of just a sign of highly civilized people interacting with one another, and also it's meant to instruct us. Sometimes, and we see that more in the Western culture, where there is a lot of focus of, as they say, that cut through the chase, get to the point directly. It takes away the sweetness of the relationship. So there is never any opportunity to build relationships. There is the opportunity to finish the task and move on, but then it is it becomes very transactional. So we will see this sweet building of relationship between Kardam Muni and Swayambhu Manu. Verse 51. Yo kride vagnindra vayunam yam dharma prachetasham rupani sthana adhastse tasmai shukla yate namaha. When necessary, you assume the part of the sun god, the moon god, Agni, the god of fire, Indra, the lord of paradise, Vayu, the wind god, Yama, the god of punishment, Dharma, the god of piety, and Varun, the god presiding over the waters. All obeisances to you, who are none other than Lord Vishnu. So Vishwanath Chakravarti, when commenting on this verse, he says that Kardama Muni is glorifying 8 aspects of the emperor by correlating that opulence with the deity that presides over the opulence. So majesty means just being opulent, I guess, being richly dressed, being awe-inspiring, and the presiding deity for that is Surya Dev. Fame, the presiding deity is moon. Being invincible, presiding deity is fire. Then lordship, the presiding deity is Indra. Being present everywhere, either by the self or by influence, the presiding deity is Vayu. Then punishing the sinful, the presiding deity is Lord Yam. Protecting of the righteous, the presiding deity is Dharma. And being grave and deep and with hidden treasures, which means difficult to fathom, the presiding deity is Varun. So all these qualities of majesty and fame and being invincible and being the predominator and being perceived to be present everywhere, being the punisher of the sinful and the protector of the righteous, being grave and deep with unfathomable treasures. They are uh, uh, presided by the deities. So, which is why Kardam Muni is glorifying Swayambhu Manu, that you are part of the sun god, the moon god, Indra, etc. Kardam Muni then says that he says that Namahate, that obeisances unto you. So Prabhupada says that Kardam was a Brahman and Swayambhu was a Kshatriya. So he did not offer him obeisances like falling on the ground or giving obeisances. But he's offering obeisances to Swayambhu Manu by words. And the speciality of the Brahman is such that just like for the Kshatriya, the sword is the weapon, for the Brahman, the spoken word is their most potent aspect. So by his words, he is giving obeisances to Swayambhu Manu. Ultimately, he is saying that you are the representative of the Supreme Lord. And the Supreme Lord is worshipable by everyone, whether the person is a Brahman or a Kshatriya or a Vaishya or a Shudra. So even when Kardam Muni is giving verbal obeisances, then he is giving to the Lord, he is giving to Swayambhu Manu as the representative of the Devas and ultimately as the representative of Lord Vishnu. Okay. Next 3 verses. Na yada ratham asthaya jayatram niganarpitam vishujak chandakodando rathena trashayannagha swasenya charan kshunam vipayan mandalam bhuvaha Vikarshan Brahatim Sena Paryatasyam Shumaniva Tadev Se Tabaha Sarve Varnashram Nibandanaha Bhagvadra Chitarajan Vidyeran Batadasyubhihi. If you did not mount your victorious jeweled chariot, whose mere presence threatens culprits, if you did not produce fierce sounds by the twangling of your bow, and if you did not roam around the world like the brilliant sun, leading a huge army whose trampling feet causes the globe of the earth to tremble, then all the moral laws governing the varnas and the ashrams created by the Lord himself would be broken by the rogues and rascals. The previous verse, we see that Kardam Muni was describing the characteristics of, or glorifying the characteristics of Swayambhu Manu. In this verse, he is glorifying the activities of it. That what does he do that makes him worthy of glorification? So, commenting on Varnashram, Srila Prabhupada talks about the 4 ashrams: Brahmacharya, Grahastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyas, and then the 4 varnas: the Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. And then he comments that the varnashram system should not be confused with the caste system, because the caste system is a degraded form of the varnashram system. And the reason is that what the caste system stipulates is that one's varna is determined by birth. And the varnashram system says that one's varna is determined by one's characteristics. Guna karma vibhagasha, the activities and characteristics. So Prabhupada says that because there is no spiritual leadership, this varnashram system has been degraded into the caste system. But because the caste system is a cause of so much of angst, there are people who reject the varnashram system also. And that is incorrect. So just because it has degraded into something that it is not, it does not make sense to reject the original form, which is actually Kardam is saying Bhagavad Rachita, that it has been constructed by the Lord. And Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, right, 4:13, Chaturvanya Maya Sreshta, Guna Karma Vibhagasha. And because it is constructed by the Lord, it is not based on it being accepted or rejected by humans. The laws of the Lord, they transcend acceptance and rejection. They are absolute. So the point is made by Prabhupada is that even if people reject varnashram will still be there. Now it's a different matter that in the current age the varnashram manifests mostly as grahastha shudras, but nevertheless it is there, and you see reflections of it. You see people who take to teaching, who see people who take to being in the defense or administrators. You see people who engage in commerce, and then you see people who are serving others. So there is this natural proclivity by which varnas are established, and to some extent ashrams also. Ashram is more, the notion of ashram is more diluted because of the influence of the age. Okay, so continuing to the next verse. This is verse 55. Adharmascha samedeta loluperi vinakshirbihi shayena tvailokayam dasyugrasto vinakshati. If you gave up all thought of the world situation, unrighteousness would flourish. For men who hanker only after money would be opposed. Such miscreants would attack, and the world would perish. So this verse is talking about the conception or the mental state. So we looked at the qualities of Swayambhavu Manu, we looked at his activities. Now Kanda Muni is talking about his conception. The fact that not only is he doing the duty that has been given to him, but just like a father cares for a child, he is also caring for his citizens and the kingdom. So Kardam Muni, he speaks about it in negative, saying that if you did not do that, then what would happen? Unrighteousness would flourish. So because of the care of the emperor, righteousness exists. Because of the concern of the emperor, people do not become overly materialistic. So this is a nod to the fact of how Swayambhavu Manu is also nourishing spirituality. Because only by the spiritual conception, righteousness comes. detachment from money come, tolerance come. The Kardamuni says the world would perish, vinakshati, right? So the sustenance of the world is because of the spiritual conception. And Prabhupada, he compares this with the current situation, because in a way it is describing what we are seeing now, that unrighteousness is flourishing, men are hankering only after money, and miscreants are attacking here and there. Prabhupada says the society is now in chaos, and there is neither peace nor prosperity. It is clearly stated herein that with the vigilance of a strong, without the vigilance, unless there is the vigilance of a strong king, impious, unqualified men will claim a certain status in the society, and this will make the social order perish. So very important for Prabhupada makes this point over and over again. Very important for the leaders to be Krishna conscious, because without that, society will devolve. Okay, so we come to the last verse of the chapter, and then after that we'll take a pause for any discussion. Athapi prache tvam vira yadartham tvam yahagatah tadvayam nirvayalikena pratipadya mahe. In spite of all this, I ask you, O valiant king, the purpose for which you have come here. Whatever it may be, we shall carry it out without reservation. So Atapi, in spite of all this, is Kardamuni acknowledging the fact that Swayambhava Manu has all reasons to come to his ashram. So he described his activities, that he travels all over the globe, making sure that his citizens are happy. He talked about his nature, that he's pious and powerful, and they make sure that dharma is followed. He also talked about his loving concern. So when he says Atapi, it means that for all these reasons, you could be over here. But in spite of me knowing this, I'm still asking you if there is any other reason for which you have come here. Prabhupada says that earlier on, typically speaking, the sages would go to the kings and under the guise of asking for either a donation, charity, or protection, they would preach to the kings. And then the kings would also visit the sages in their hermitage. They would seek advice from them. They would try and serve them. They would also use it to become grounded again in their spirituality. So this relationship of each ashram nourishing one another, or rather each varna nourishing each other, Prabhupada says is bhakti karya. So Prabhupada says there is a nice verse describing the relationship of mutual beneficial interest between the Brahman and the Kshatriya. Kshatram Dvijatvam. So Kshatram means the royal order, and Dvijatvam means the Brahmanical order. The two were meant for mutual interest. The royal order would protect the Brahmanas so that they could cultivate spiritual advancement, and the Brahmanas would guide the royal order so that they could act according to their for the ultimate spiritual benefit. One point of observation that uh, you may have already noticed, but I still want to make, is that many of Srila Prabhupada's purport in this chapter and in chapters that we will read are going to be talking about Varnashram. Like he's talking about the relationship between Brahmanas and Kshatriyas. So we saw Prabhupada talking about Grahastha life and commenting about marriage. So this was in 27th verse, in the purport of the 27th verse of this chapter. In the very next verse, he talks about the importance of having a marriage that is invoking the grace of the Lord. And then in the 11th verse, he talks about the difference between a Gramedi and Grahastha. In the next chapter, Prabhupada will talk about the factors that are important in choosing a wife. This is in the 15th verse of next chapter. Then Prabhupada also speaks about the duties of the Grahasthas and the Sannyasis. This is in the 31st verse of this chapter. Then as Grahasthas, the importance of having a family that is aligned to the service of the Lord. 19th verse of the next chapter. And then in the 24th chapter, Srila Prabhupada will speak more about marriage. The importance of what are the considerations for the marriage. 24th chapter, 15th verse, he will talk about further considerations of matching the nature of a boy and girl in marriage. In this particular section, 34 to 57, Prabhupada talks about Varnashram Dharma in the context of Devi Varnashram. So whenever Varnashram comes, Srila Prabhupada, he aligns it with the need of following Varnashram Dharma to make spiritual progress. That is Devi Varnashram. Varnashram Dharma can also be followed to have material opulence, which is Karma Varnashram, or to develop Atma Gyan, which is Jnana Karma Varnashram. But Prabhupada, and is consistent in that in this current day and age, Karma and Gyan are impossible. So if Varnashram Dharma has to be followed, it has to be Devi Varnashram. So in this chapter from verses 34 to 57, in the next chapter, actually the first 39 verses, they all, Prabhupada speaks about Devi Varnashram. In the 23rd chapter, the first 11 verses. So consistently, Prabhupada is developing the theme of Devi Varnashram. And the reason I'm pointing it out is because now we are not doing it over here because it's obviously beyond the scope of Bhakti Vaibhava. But if somebody were to extract Varnashram Dharma as per the Bhagavatam commented by Prabhupada, these would be the verses that would help. There are other places also he talks, but at least in the context of the third canto. So the point that is made is that the Bhagavatam is the Paramhamsa Samhita, and much of the Bhagavatam is written to help people make spiritual advancements. So the focus is more so on adhyatmic aspects, not so much on the Lokik aspects, not so much on marriage and household duties. So even if the Bhagavatam speaks about these things, they are in conjunction with this ultimate goal, which is Daivi. Which is why Srila Prabhupada also, his commentary is in line with the spirit of the Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam is not meant to be a replacement for Manu Samhita or for the Karmakand portion of the Vedas, which talks about the duties of the husband and the wife. Even if they refer to it, that they're referring it to the context, in the context of how to use this in making spiritual progress. And the relationship between Devahuti and Kardam is an ideal example of that. If we look again, if we step back, we will see that at one level, Bhagavatam, or the speakers of the Bhagavatam, they criticize those who focus on marriage and household life. Right? If you remember in the second canto, as soon as Sukadeva Goswami started speaking, he started criticizing those who are too much engrossed in their household life, attached to their wife and children, Dehapatya Kalatradesh, Atmasenasya Satsvapi, and that they consider them to be their soldiers. And Pashanapina Pashati, that they see that they're all being destroyed, but they see but do not see. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna makes this point that one should only aspire to do enough to benefit the soul. So the verse quoted is 927, Yat Karoshi Yadasnashi Yajoshi Dadashi Chat. That whatever you do, you should do for the pleasure of Krishna. So essentially what is happening is that these two conceptions are being combined. So if a person has to enter Grahastha life, then do it for the pleasure of Krishna. If the person is inclined to perform austerities, do it for the pleasure of Krishna. A person who has entered into Grahastha life for the pleasure of Krishna is far superior to a person performing austerities not for the pleasure of Krishna. So Prabhupada says that Mahaprabhu has stated, Prema Pumartha Mahan, that the soul's true necessity is love of Krishna. So one should act in all situations for the pleasure of Krishna. Whether a person is a Brahman, Vaishya, Kshatriya, Shudra, whether the person is a sannyasi or a grahastha or a vanaprastha or a brahmachari, that's what makes it glorious. If not, it is shrameva hi kevalam. It is useless effort. That brings us to the end of the 21st chapter, and I'm going to see if I'm going to pause over here and see if you have any comments.
Just to elaborate on this, Prabhuji, the ultimate goal, whether it is, if you take only two, right? Like, for example, the different grahastha and the brahmachari, let us say, to achieve bhakti yoga, it is they are having their own responsibilities. Like at the end of the day, the achievement of bhakti yoga has its own route for these. Can you elaborate on this? Like for a grahastha, for example, for us, like maybe mainly to balance out, like Sita Pragya, right? To balance out the activities, what has been told. And for brahmachari, there are certain activities they have to follow to achieve the bhakti. Just if you can elaborate on that, basically goal is to achieve bhakti or that kind of devotional service?
The goal, yes, Prabhu, thank you. So the goal is ultimately to to cultivate bhakti. So, like you're giving the example of a brahmachari, and as per the varnashram system, what does the brahmachari do? They study, they lead a simple life, they serve their guru, and that's essentially the description of brahmachari ashram. In Devi Varnashram, these activities are centered around the personality of Godhead. That they study, but what do they study? They study scriptures that are elucidating the Lord, glorifying the Lord. They take initiation in the Vaishnava Sampradaya. They serve the Guru over there. In the Grastha ashram, the duties that are enunciated are giving in charity, supporting the other ashrams, purifying oneself by the performance of yajna. So all those duties can be performed around Krishna as a center. You given charity to deserving devotees. Support the other devotees who have given their lives, dedicated their lives to Krishna. Perform the Sankirtan Yajna, the chanting of the holy name. So at a superficial level, the duties do not change. The conception with which the duties are performed are changed. And essentially, that is what Srila Prabhupada says is the process by which these varnashrams can be used to re-establish one's own spiritual position. Does that make sense, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Okay.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Is it in the same light that we have heard often Srila Prabhupada said that a Vaishnava is higher than a Brahmana?
Not sure, Prabhu. Not sure. It was a very specific debate actually between the Brahmanas and the Vaishnavas. The genesis of the debate was that even a Shudra can become a Vaishnava. So the fact was that the Brahmanas, and these were Smarta Brahmanas, they were saying that how can a Shudra become a Brahman? And Bhakti Siddhant was the person who debated, and he made this point, giving various scriptural references, that one who knows the science of God is the most perfect. So my understanding is, and I haven't read the details of the debate. My understanding is that it wasn't Bhakti Siddhanta's purpose to prove that a Vaishnava is higher than a Brahman, but to prove that a Brahman, Vaishnava is bona fide. Because actually, he started off the debate with the glorification of the Brahmans. He spoke for a long time glorifying the Brahmans, and for a while the people who were confused that whose side is he speaking from. And the Brahmins were happy, thinking that he had decided to give up his position. But then he established that all the qualities that make the Brahman glorious, they come automatically by one who worships Lord Vishnu. So he wasn't like really proving, he wasn't in that mood of saying, I'm better than you, you're better than me. The Brahmins were in that mood. his mood was that they're equally following the path to the Lord as the Brahmins are. But like I said, I haven't read the debate and cannot speak very authoritatively about it.
Prabhu, I think also there are Brahmana that are more in ritualistic Brahman compared to the Brahmana that is mostly in the performance of yajna for the glorification of the Lord, like to please Lord Vishnu, compared to those who do karmakanda.
Yes, there is a category of Brahmins that are known as Vipras. And the Vipras are the ones who are more into karmakanda. Not all Brahmins, at least as per the Vedic system, not all Brahmins. But yes, there is a category of Brahmins that are more whose field of expertise is karmakanda. Like if you remember when the Pandavas were in the forest, then they requested Dhaumya Rishi to accompany them. So Dhaumya was a Brahmin, but his field of expertise was karmakanda. To propitiate the proper deities and etc., given charity to qualified people. And there are Brahmins who are also into the Brahman. So they are the ones who are more into transcendental advancement. That they worship the Lord, they study the scriptures accordingly. And so in itself, for obvious reasons, Krishna is very favorable to Brahmins. In this particular, yes, Prabhu. So, but in this particular debate, I think the point of debate was that a Brahman can be only born in a Brahman's family, which was refuted by Bhakti Siddhanta.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay. So if there are no more questions, then we can move on to the next chapter. This is Canto 3, Chapter 22. The title of the chapter is The Marriage of Kardama Muni and Devahuti. I generally summarize the chapter at the end, but I think here I just summarized it when we started just a few verses ago. So I'm not going to summarize 21. We'll begin with a summary of 22. The previous chapter ended with the Kardama Muni glorifying Swayambhava Manu. This chapter begins with Swayambhava Manu glorifying Kardama Muni. So we see this lot of mutual respect and admiration between these two exalted personalities. Then following that, Manu, he offers Devahuti to Kardama Muni, and then he goes through the reasons why he thinks that Devahuti is a suitable daughter to Kardama Muni. And no surprise, Kardama Muni gladly accepts the hand of Devahuti, but with one condition. He places one condition and he says that if you accept this condition, then I will marry her. And we'll see what that condition is. Swayambhava Manu, of course, accepts that condition, but we'll see when we reach that part of the chapter. Then the chapter concludes with the marriage of Kardama Muni and Devahuti, following which Swayambhava Manu returns, and then there is a description of the glorious rule of Swayambhava Manu. So this is a relatively short chapter, about just about 39 verses. Okay, so verse 1, Canto 3, chapter 22, verse 1. Maitre vacha evam avakshata shesha guna karmo daya muni savrida ivatam samra uparatam vachaha. Sri Maitreya said, after describing the greatness of the emperor's manifold qualities and activities, the sage became silent, and the emperor, feeling modesty, addressed him as follows. So in 7 verses, from 1 to 7, we will see genuine glorification of Kardama Muni by the Manu. So Kardama Muni, after glorifying Swayambhav Manu, he became silent, uparatam. And by this we can also understand his mood of detachment. So the reason that it is saying that he fell silent is because he wasn't glorifying for a purpose. So sometimes in material transactions, we go to a person and say that you're good, you're nice, you're rich, you're powerful. Can you do this for me? Can you help me out over here? So it's basically the setup for an ask. Not in the case of Kardama Muni. So at that point, Swayambhav Manu may have got up and left, or whatever. But Kardama Muni, his glorification was reflecting genuinely on the qualities of Swayambhav Manu, on his activities, on his mental conception. Verse 2. Manurvacha Brahmasrat Swamukhato Yushmamatma Paripshaya Chandomaya Stapo Vidya Yoga Yukta Nalampatam. Manu replied, to expand himself in Vedic knowledge, Lord Brahma, the personified Veda, from his phrase created you, the Brahmins, who are full of austerity, knowledge, and mystic power, and are averse to sense gratification. So Vishwanath Chakravarti says that Swayambhav Manu has this fear in him that Kardama Muni would refuse his daughter in marriage. So in 2.5 verses, he is talking about the relationship between the Brahmanas and the Kshatriyas. So Lord Brahma had created the Brahmanas with a desire to preserve the Vedas by propagating them. Atma Paripishya. So Prabhupada says that specifically mentioned here that the Brahmins were created from the face of the cosmic personality, the Virat Purush. And the Kshatriyas were created from his arm, and the Vaishyas from the waist, and the Shudras from the legs. The Brahmanas are meant for austerity, learning, knowledge, and are averse to all kinds of sense gratification. Verse 2. Tad prana yasharjak chashman doha sahasrat sahasrapa hridayam tasya hi brahma kshatram mangam prachakshate. For the protection of the Brahmins, the 1,000-legged Supreme Being created us, the Kshatriyas, from his 1,000 arms. Hence, the Brahmins are said to be his heart and the Kshatriyas his arms. So after glorifying the Brahmins, Manu, he is talking about the relationship between the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas. That they are meant to protect each other. So Prabhupada says that the Kshatriyas are specifically meant to protect the Brahmins. Why? Because if the Brahmins are protected, then the head of the civilization is protected. So if the head is not protected, or so Prabhupada gives his body that example, that is a person with a strong body and with a lot of vitality, lot of vigor, but he's mad. He's more dangerous. So similarly, if the Brahmanas are not in order and the other Varnas are in order, more dangerous. Because you have powerful Kshatriyas, but they do not have proper guidance. And on the other side, the Kshatriyas are meant to protect the Brahmins, because the Brahmins, they don't take up arms. They don't fight. If they are being prosecuted, then we see examples of Brahmanas cursing, but by and large they don't curse. That's the nature of the Brahmins, that one of their quality is that of forgiveness. So the Kshatriyas are meant to provide the protection to the Brahmanas. So in this way, the society is flourishing, or is supposed to flourish. That if the head is in place, then the body acts properly. And if the hand is protecting the head, then one can be assured that the head will function properly. And of course, Swambhu Manu is making this point to ultimately lead to the fact that by accepting his daughter in marriage, this protection will be enacted. So he's leading to that logical conclusion. Verse 4, Ato haya anyanamatmana brahma kshatram cha rakshataha rakshati sma vayo devaha yah sada sad atmakaha. That is why the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas protect each other as well as themselves. And the Lord himself, who is both the cause and the effect and is yet immutable, protects them to each other. So same point being made, that the Brahmins protect the Kshatriyas by the strength of their austerity, by the strength of their knowledge. The Kshatriyas protect the Brahmanas by the strength of their body. And ultimately, they are both protected by the Lord. So it is not that the Brahmanas and the Kshatriyas, they protect one another and they become independent. But they protect each other under the protection of the Lord, who is the real protector. And Swambhu Manu also makes the point that even though the Lord is protecting them, Rakshatisma, he is avyaya. Avyaya means that he is not getting involved in all this. He remains aloof. Prabhupada translates that as immutable, unchangeable. Because in the society there is a lot of churn that is going on. Even in a Vedic society, there is a lot of churn. Brahmanas protecting Kshatriyas, Kshatriyas acting out for the instructions of Brahmanas, and them protecting the Brahmanas. So lot of activities being done. So by saying that they have been protected by the Lord, one might think that the Lord is also now the third player in this, between the Brahmanas and the Kshatriyas. When necessary, he jumps in and protects the Brahmanas. He protects the Kshatriyas. But that's not happening. The protection of the Lord is in terms of establishing the system that creates the protection. This whole system of Varnashram has been created by the Lord so that the protection is enacted by following the rules and regulations of the Varnashrams. Verse 5. Tava Sandra Shanadeva Chinname Sarva Samshayaha Yad Swayam Bhagavan Pritya Dharmamari Rakshisho. Now I have resolved all my doubts simply by meeting you. For your Lordship has very kindly and clearly explained the duty of a king who desires to protect his subjects. So we see over here the very, very refined qualities of Swambhavu Manu. That Kardama Muni was glorifying Swambhavu Manu, but Swambhavu Manu in humility is accepting it as instructions. And factually, this happens a lot of time. That when a person is glorified, then buried in that glorification is instructions. The spiritual master says that it's very good that you're getting up in the morning and chanting. I'm pleased with it. So that there is glorification, but what does the disciple hear? That if I have to please my spiritual master, I should get up in the morning and chant. Or he says that you're reading Prabhupada's book, very nice. I appreciate the fact that you're reading them with so much of introspection. And the disciple hears that I should make it my duty to regularly read and study Prabhupada's books. So out of humility, Swambhavu Manu, he's accepting the praise of Kardama Muni as instruction. It's not false humility. He's not saying that, oh, I really can't do all this, and actually my mental conception is completely different, and I'm always feeling that how should I steal from other people, so I can't really take credit for this. But the implicit message that he's giving is that thank you for acknowledging this, and I will strive to do more of what you have acknowledged, just to please you. So when he's saying that that you explain the duty of a king who desires to protect his subjects, one can understand that he's saying that just by meeting you, I have become protected. Because just by meeting him, he has gotten all these valuable instructions. So now he can execute his prescribed duties. And by executing his prescribed duties, he will be protected. So Srila Prabhupada has a longish purport in this, in which he talks about the potency of meeting a saintly person. That even a short meeting with a saintly person is very, very potent. So he says that if one establishes a proper association with a saintly person, even for a moment, one attains all perfection. And then he gives his own life example. He says that once we had the opportunity to meet Vishnupad Shri Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj, who on first sight, he requested this humble self to preach his message in the Western countries. There was no preparation for this, but somehow or the other, he desired. And by his grace, we are now engaged in executing his order, which has given us a transcendental occupation and has saved and liberated us from the occupation of material activities. Thus, it is actually a fact that if one meets a saintly person, completely engaged in transcendental duties, and achieves his favor, then one's life mission becomes complete. What is not possible to achieve in thousands of lives can be achieved in one moment if there is an opportunity to meet a saintly person and try to dissociate oneself with the common man. Because by one word of a saintly person, one can be liberated from material entanglement. A saintly person has the power, because of his spiritual advancement, to give immediate liberation to the conditioned soul. Here Manu admits that all his doubts are now over because Kardam has very kindly described the different duties of individual souls. So very interesting, but once in a while talks about his first meeting with his Guru Maharaj. But here we see so much of humility in Prabhupada's statements, that everything that he is doing, he's attributing it to the potency of his Guru Maharaj. So for those of you who have read Lilamrita, you're aware that Prabhupada was not really interested in going to the meeting, because at that time he was more of a nationalist. He was a follower of Mahatma Gandhi, and his main focus was that unless we free India from British rule, we cannot establish spiritual India. But this friend, somehow he convinced him, and that's what Prabhupada asked Bhaktisiddhanta, that unless we are free, how can we practice spirituality? And Bhaktisiddhanta, he expertly defeated Prabhupada. And he said, freedom from what? That if you get free from the Britishers, I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, if you get freedom from Britishers, will you be freed from birth and death? That's still going on. So you need to free yourself from that. And then, of course, he instructed him that you need to, that a good English-speaking boy like you should preach to the Western world. And even though Prabhupada, after that, he waited 11 years before he took initiation from Bhaktisiddhanta, but he says that from that point onwards, he was a disciple of Bhaktisiddhanta, because he started thinking about it, he started meditating upon it. So short association with a saintly person and a receptive heart is the most potent form of changing one's life. And we see that in the mood of Prabhupada brings it back to that of Manu. We see that in the mood of Swayambhavu Manu. Okay, so I'm going to pause over here and see if somebody has any concluding thoughts. I know we just discussed 5 verses, but we also have just maybe 4 or 5 minutes left. So about these verses, or about chapter 21, or anything else that you would like to discuss, we can talk about it.
Hare Krishna, just a comment. Srila Prabhupada, he said, all the thing come from his guru. And then here also he said, by his grace, we are now engaging. And he said, no, all the disciple has been sent by Bhaktisiddhanta. For him, there is no credit. It's coming from him, and you were sent by him. And now we are engaging in doing it.
You're right. He would always say that. He would say that my Guru Maharaj has sent all of you to help me serve him. He would also say that my Guru Maharaj could have made the whole world Krishna conscious, but he wanted to leave some service for me to do.
Yes. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So if we don't have any more questions, we'll end a few minutes early. And as I mentioned last time, we'll take a break. I'm not sure how many classes, but we'll start, I think, a couple of classes. But we'll start in the first class. I guess it's a Monday of 2021. So I wish you all a very, very happy and prosperous Krishna conscious New Year. And it's hard to believe, but Prem Kishore probably has a better understanding of the time, but I'm guessing it's almost been 2 years since we have been
2 years, January of 2018.
3 years. Okay. Seems like 3 months, at least to me. But I know for some of you, it may be like 30 years, especially the parts about Virat Purush, and which is coming soon now. It's one of the coming attractions in the third canto, the whole process of creation, Sarga and Visarga. So also thank you. I think it's a time for me to reflect on the mercy that I've received through all of you, that you have inspired me to continue to study the Bhagavatam, share my thoughts with you, inspired me by your constant attendance and your thoughtful questions. So for all that, thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you in a few weeks in 2021. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Vancha kalpatarubhayascha kripa sindhubheva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thai Gaur Pimanande. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Prabhu.
Very well.